So I wanted to ask you about the Cake Literary family because they're thanked prominently in the acknowledgments.
Yes.
And I know that they had some involvement with getting this ball rolling. So who are they, and how did this partnership get started?
Yeah, Cake Literary is a packaging company, which doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, but if you know what it is, that's what they are. They basically are a company that really wants to more diverse books on the shelves, and it's specifically like high concept, fun adventure books written by diverse authors about like diverse characters. The founders, Daniel Clayton and Sona Cherapotra, were actually alumni of my writing program. So I met them at like an alumni event, and there was cheese, and I was in the corner eating the cheese and not talking to anyone.
What kind of cheese?
They had the cubes, but they also had the little slices, and then they also had the ones that you slice yourself because they're even bigger.
That is completely understandable. Why would you with that kind of action going on?
There was also fruit, but I'm not so into fruit. I'm more into cheese. I've gotten lost on a cheese train.
So you were there, cheese, and somebody from Cake Literary said, "I like cheese. Let's have some together." Or...
No. So I wasn't talking to them, but they were talking to some of my writing friends, and luckily mentioned that they had this idea for a project. They wanted to see this book on the shelf about Mexican-American family in Texas. And, we were in New York at the time. And so, like, not as many Texans, I guess, not as many Mexican-Americans hanging around. I'm sure that because everybody, but Houston is actually more diverse. It's the #1 most diverse city in the country. For those of you who were curious, I'm very proud of that.
As you should be. Good job, Houston.
Yeah. So
that couldn't have been a better moment. I mean, unless they said, like, I want this author to wear a hoodie with Marvel on its front.
Right. Yeah, no, it was very, very lucky for me because, and I wasn't even standing there, but my friends were, and they immediately came and dragged me away from the cheese and were like, talk to these very smart people who want to help you. So I sat down with Danielle and Sona to talk about, this idea and what Cake Literary was, and they had basically come up with the idea of Leo and her family, and a lot of the plot they had sort of like a skeleton outline of the plot of book 1. So a lot of times people will ask me, where do you get your ideas? And I'm like, I get them from Danielle and Sona, which is not it's not what they were expecting usually. But what I loved about working with them is that, we sat down for lunch and we talked about like what that sort of material that they had, and they were just very collaborative outlook from the beginning. Like I would say like, I think it would be so cool if this happened. And they were like, oh yeah, totally. And I'd be like, oh, and what if, instead of the age of magic being 13, we raised it to 15 because that's like a, important age. And they were like, yes, we love it. And I think they just really, they had this idea, really great idea. I think, people hear magical baking and are already in.
For the recipes alone, if there's nothing else.
Yeah. Which and Danielle makes the recipes because I've mentioned I don't bake. So people hear that, like they had this great idea, and then they were really, I think, great about giving the idea, like, hey, would you like to write this? And I was like, yes, I have never wanted to write anything more. And so it worked out really well because I just got to kind of take these characters and these plot ideas and make them my own. With book 2, the outline, we worked together on the outline. With book 3, I had like a very clear idea of one of the storylines that I really wanted to write, and then Danielle and Sona helped me fill in sort of the subplots, the B plots. So I've just been really happy working with them. They work on a lot of great books. They're the brilliant minds behind the Gauntlet and Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky, and their novel that they actually wrote together, Danielle and Sona wrote together, Tiny Pretty Things, which is becoming a Netflix series. So they're just, they're really great. They understand story really well, and they're using that understanding and knowledge of how to like really engaging stories to kind of let other writers get their foot into the industry, which is like super awesome.
I going for the easy laugh with the Marvel hoodie jacket earlier, or the Marvel hoodie line. But I'm sure it wasn't just we need a Mexican American from Houston. Any Mexican American from Houston will do. So when you sit down with them, how do you convince them that you are the person to tell this story? At that point, you already had your MFA locked away, right?
It wasn't finished, but I was in the program. Yeah. So I think it's one of those like hard to define things. I really connected with the story, and I think that's what we talked about a lot in that first meeting was sort of like, you know, what this story was going to do and why it was an important story to get out in the world, and which parts of the character I connected with and which parts of sort of the overall themes I connected with. And I also talked a lot about books that I liked, which luckily were some of the books that they liked too. So that's always a good indication. Yeah. But yeah, I think so at that time, and this was 2014, if not 2013. So different political climate, not completely unrelated, but a different climate. You know, we focused a lot in that first conversation about how we really wanted to infuse some joy into diverse stories, because a lot of the diverse stories that had been coming out were very like the struggle. Not every single one, but you know, it still is things that one of the big types of book that gets attention is the struggle books. Give me like 1 second.
Oh, you're fine. That's a problem I encountered as well. For those who haven't listened to this show before, my wife is black. Banneker Bones is a biracial detective character I wrote for my son because, without revealing my age, I grew up white in the 80s and 90s, white and male in a small Indiana town of mostly all white people. And so I had never noticed that, oh, this is a problem with our literature. Everybody stars me. It's great.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where my wife and I were getting serious. I'm okay. Well, my son wants to read books about young black boys, young biracial boys. What have you got? It's like, oh, here are the Civil War books.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the books about slavery, books about slavery and civil rights. Sorry, and great, all very important. You should read every last one, internalize it. But where is the book where the little biracial boy gets to tour a chocolate factory with workers from all kinds of countries, with wonderful medical plans, dental? They don't have to sing the stupid songs if they don't want to. It's a good life.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that was really our mindset going in, was like, we're just going to focus on this, like the magic and the power and the joy of this family. And I was really excited to take part in that. I'm okay. Being Latinx is complicated. So bicultural is maybe the better term. Biracial doesn't really work because, like, you know, a lot of Latinx people are already biracial, or like you can be any race and still be Latinx. So.
Well, honestly, biracial is kind of a dumb term because unless you have papers going back 100 generations, how do you know?
Yeah. So I try to go with bicultural, but then sometimes people don't always like. Sometimes people use bicultural differently to being like, you know, lived in one culture and then lived in another culture. Whatever. There's a lot of things, but I have Mexican American family and I have white family, Irish and German family, Irish American and German American family. And Italian American family. I forgot them. I didn't forget them. But anyway, my point is I relate to that, not necessarily seeing yourself. And I, you know, for a little bit when I started these books, I was like worried that I was overstepping what I knew. I was writing like a not bicultural family, a fully Mexican American family. And it was a little nerve-wracking at first because I was like, am I really, you know, am I allowed to tell this story? Am I the right person? Am I representing exactly perfectly the Mexican American family? Which is a ridiculous concept if you couldn't hear the sarcasm in my voice.
Is there such a thing? Have they been identified? Should we all be looking up to them?
There is a platonic ideal of a Mexican American family, as it turns out. But like getting myself to that point to realize that I was just writing one family and one story and one character was a little bit of a it took some confidence, and luckily for me, I mean, I know other people work through this on their own, like adults, but luckily for me, Cake kind of gave me that confidence. They said, like, yes, we're talking to you about this topic. You know, you feel passionately about it. You are welcome to come and take this story. And I was sitting there going, like, I'm sure you could find a better Mexican American writer. Yeah, that we could, but we don't need to.
If we've got you, we love you. Why are you fighting us on this?
Yeah. So that was kind of a fun, and then I feel like, you know, writing the whole series has like really helped me grow into that sort of idea of like, oh, like I am enough. I don't have to, you know, I'm not trying to talk over anyone or say that I am the definitive experience, but I'm just writing these books that I'm writing, and that's okay. That's good, in fact.
So at what point did this begin to feel like your story as opposed to a freelance project that you've been hired to?
Pretty early on. I mean, so I think big changes that I made in the first book was because by book 2 and book 3 I was like actively involved in making up the plot, so it like didn't feel at all like it wasn't my project. Book 1, I started making changes to sort of the materials and outline they had given me, partially because they had a character who was not really super described. She was Caroline. She was described as being blonde, and her name was Caroline Campbell. And, you know, I don't remember if they specifically said she was white, but it was sort of the implication. And I have a best friend from college who, you know, is named Claire and is blonde and is half Costa Rican. Not half, because, you know, people are not percentages, but she has Costa Rican family. And so I just kind of, you know, was planning out how to write this story where Leo doesn't speak Spanish and she has to get a Spanish dictionary to translate every single page of her book. And I was like, you know, this is going to take too long. And I've been sitting in front of a book with a Spanish dictionary next to me, and it's not that exciting, and it's not something I really want to write multiple scenes of. So can we get a Spanish speaker to hang out with Leo? And so I was like, you know what? She's already hanging out with Caroline. She's already planning to tell Caroline about her magic. Caroline can speak Spanish. Like, there's no reason that she can't. So I mean, she didn't change. She's still Caroline Campbell. She still has blonde hair. She's still Leo's good friend and then she moved away. But now she has that Costa Rican heritage. And, you know, that kind of gave me a place to, and I do this more in book 2, but even in book 1, work through like some of the cultural feels through Caroline. Then, you know, book 2 happened and Caroline took sort of a little bit more of a main role as the friend who maybe like wasn't as welcome in the bakery because she wasn't part of the close-knit family. Leo's sisters were like, even though she knew about the magic, Leo's sisters were a little suspicious of her and saying like, she's hanging around too much. She knows too much. We're not sure if this is okay. And so we got to kind of work through her feelings in that book. And then, you know, she gets a little bit of excitement as well. And yeah, so I think, and then also in book 1, there was some plot things where things were escalating a lot towards the end. And Leo had the police call, and then she like had the police called again. And it's like, let's streamline this on a plot level. And I was really like taking whole bullet points off of the outline. And so I think I sent an email at that point and said like, hey y'all, I'm changing some things. I hope you don't feel like I have destroyed and desecrated your work. And I don't exactly remember what the answer was, but it was basically like, okay, we don't care. Not we don't care, but like, we trust you. And so I think that was when I was like, oh, I can really just make this my own. This is my project. Which again is such a good feeling because they're, you know, sometimes Write for Hire can go very much the opposite way where people are really micromanaging what they want from you. And I'm very glad that wasn't my experience from the beginning of this.
You know, just call them back and say, hey, good news. It's now a police drama with an erotic romance subplot.
Precisely.
And then is that going to be, are you doing something similar for the Quidditch book, or is the Quidditch book 100% whole cloth from your mind sprung up? Not that any book is ever that way. I don't know why I'm saying this.
That's actually what I was gonna say. But no, it is 100% whole cloth, air quotes, because it's not a real thing. Own brain. That's why it took me 6 years finished instead of the 2 or, well, I don't know. I started writing it also in 2014. So I started the first Love, Sugar, Magic and the Quidditch book at the same time. And I've gotten 3 Love, Sugar, Magic books in the time it took me to get 1 finished Quidditch book. Because I was sort of on my own, slogging through the mud of like, oh, I need to learn how to plot. Womp. And then on an industry side, oh, I need to get an agent. Oh, all these things that
so you did 3 Love, Sugar, Magic books without an agent?
So I got an agent somewhere in the middle of all that. But yeah, I mean, so Cake has an agent that works on their own projects. Now they might have more than one. They might have an agency. I'm not totally sure. They had an agent.
If you're listening, come on the show, talk to me. We'll learn all about it.
Definitely. So they had an agent who worked on all their projects, and so I didn't have like my own finished manuscript, so I wasn't querying on my own. So all my stuff just went through Cake Literary. But I did, at some point in the middle of book 2, get an agent, and then get a new agent, and yeah, I was figuring industry stuff out for myself, just kind of on a totally separate track from the Love, Sugar, Magic series. It took a lot longer.